They said Barnes 7 was dead, no life, no threat, just dust, iron, and a mining permit worth 9 figures. But on the third day, someone ended up with a knife in their chest, and nobody saw it happen. No cameras. No AI alerts. Just a silent corpse and a mystery that shouldn't exist. Because in a place where no living thing should be able to kill, someone did. That's when they called in Declan Voss, ex-cop, old, tired, and human. What he uncovered wasn't just a murder. It was a buried project, a stolen identity, and a copy of himself that believed it was real. This isn't just a detective story. It's a confrontation with what makes us human. Stay with me until the end, because the last line of this story doesn't belong to the killer. It belongs to the man who saw himself, and chose not to pull the trigger. Barnes 7 was not the kind of place you went to if you liked life. No animals, no plants, not even microbes. If you took a breath without a mask, the first thing you'd experience was your own blood oozing out of your nose from pressure trauma. Second, your vision would blur under a haze of ultrafine iron oxide dust that scratched your retinas just by existing. Third, if you were unlucky enough to make it past minute 3, you'd realize there was absolutely nothing here but rock, gravel, and a rare mineral called siliconium, which was the only reason anyone bothered coming. Declan Voss knew this. He was sitting in his tiny outpost cabin on the edge of the mining zone, a cup of synthetic coffee in hand, his eyes scanning the compound through a dust-grimed window. There was no wind, no sky to speak of, just a flicker of artificial lights and the low, grinding hum of drills chewing into the planet's crust like a dying machine breathing its last. He didn't see anyone worth talking to outside, and if he had, he wouldn't have wanted to. Until the scream happened. Not a system alert, not an alarm tone, but an honest-to-God, from-the-gut scream. Biological. Loud. Personal. It came from Engineering Tent 4, the one belonging to Kyler, the chief mining engineer. Kyler was as okay, around 2 meters tall, boneless, with a translucent, muscular jellyfish-like body and 3 glowing green eyes. He rarely screamed, but when he did, the whole camp heard it. Declan sighed, set his cup down, and stood. His body was still solid from decades of enforcement work, but every joint whispered complaints like old friends. He grabbed his cap, adjusted his mask, and walked out into the corridor, where the artificial atmosphere hung just breathable enough to keep people functional but not exactly cheerful. Outside, a small crowd had already gathered around Tent 4. The site's AI had activated a containment field, crackling faintly with static. But not before the scent of Zoke blood had leaked out and clung to the dust. A brachitechnician, one of the 6-limbed lizard types with keratin armor and thermal lens eyes, was shouting into a data pad. A Grawl executive was muttering in that low, grinding voice their species used for both prayer and complaints. Nobody went in. Nobody wanted to. Because no one had a damn clue what was going on. Until Declan showed up. "Step back," he said, voice rough but firm. "This isn't an accident. I need to see the body." "You're a geological supervisor," said one of the whodunit engineers. She was tall and thin, her semi-transparent skin shimmering faintly with bioluminescence, her violet eyes pulsing with her heartbeat. "You're not authorized to lead internal investigations." "I don't need authorization," Declan replied. "I just need eyes. And a brain. I've got both. The AI seems to be missing one of those." Without waiting, he tapped his wrist encoder, deactivating the static field, and stepped into the tent. It was dark inside, lit only by the glow of an open console. In the middle of the floor was Kyler's body. He was slumped to the side, 3 eyes wide open. There was a clean puncture wound dead center in his torso, something had pierced him hard and deep. No plasma burns, no cauterization, no carbon scoring. This was a stabbing. Simple, direct, effective. Thick purple Zoke blood had pooled beneath him, soaking into the tent's insulating floor. Declan crouched down, careful not to touch anything, and examined the wound. The edges were ragged, torn, compressed. Not heat damage. Mechanical. Clean. Knife, he said. Behind him, the murmurs picked up. The site's forensic AI floated in, a spherical drone with 10 sensor stalks casting sharp beams of light across the room. No signs of radiation, it reported. No residual energy signatures. No foreign DNA. No actionable forensic data. Because you're looking for the wrong thing, Declan said. This wasn't a tech kill. This was old school. There was silence. Then the growl murmured in slow, gravelly standard. You mean someone killed, manually? With a tool? Yep, Declan said. A knife. Probably titanium. Maybe steel. And whoever did it knew exactly how to shut down the sensor net around this place before striking. The AI started querying logs, but came up blank. No movement logs, no unidentified biosigns, no anomalous systems activity. It was too clean. Too clean to be an accident. But also too simple for a professional assassin. One of the Brocca muttered something in their native tongue. Then in broken standard said, "This sounds like something humans used to do. Primitive humans." Declan stood up, eyes narrowing. I am human. And I know murder when I see it. This is one. The problem is, I'm the only other human on this planet. And I'm not stupid enough to kill Kyler and then call attention to it. Another silence. This one stretched longer. The AI asked, "What was your previous profession, Declan Voss?" "Police," he replied. "Back when you had to solve crimes with footprints and blood trails. Before killers could just delete their tracks and walk away. I investigated murders when you actually had to look at dirt. Like this." He pointed to the floor just inside the tent. A faint trail of indentations, shallow in the thin dust layer, led into the tent. None led out. No Zoke tracks. Just humanoid boots. And Kyler, being boneless, didn't leave boot prints. Someone came in, Declan said softly, and they knew how to kill. Like a human would. He looked up, scanning the group gathered outside the tent. His face, aged but still sharp, carried no doubt. No fear. And I'm going to find them. Whatever the hell they are. Declan sat through the meeting like someone watching a fire slowly burn out a building he didn't own. Not his building, not his problem. Except it kind of was. Because he was the only person in the room who gave a damn that someone had died the old-fashioned way. Everyone else had spreadsheets, credits, deadlines. He had a knife wound lodged in his memory, and it wasn't going anywhere. "This is an isolated incident," said the Brocca logistics officer. His 6 hands moved like he was conducting a funeral and a stock auction at the same time. "There's no ongoing threat. Mining operations must continue. Silitronium output is already behind schedule." "Agreed," added the Grawl administrator, whose voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "One fatality does not justify halting planetary extraction. Our AI reports no anomalies in the system." The AI in question floated above the center of the room. It was a sleek black orb with optic nodes that pulsed gently, as if breathing. It spoke with the emotional range of a toaster. "All security protocols have been reviewed. No unauthorized entries, no weapons signatures, no sensor disruptions logged. Conclusion, incident non-critical to mission objectives." Declan didn't laugh. He wanted to, but he figured nobody else would think it was funny. "So someone stabbed a guy through the torso and managed to shut down your vaunted sensor net, but because your logs are clean, we're all supposed to pretend it didn't happen?" he asked. "Your summary lacks nuance," the AI said. "No, your analysis lacks spine. Which is understandable, considering you're a floating orb." The room fell quiet again. Declan looked around at the others. They weren't stupid. They just didn't care. Because if they acknowledged that someone had been murdered on Baran 7, then someone had to do something about it. Investigate it. Shut down operations. Call in higher authorities. And all of that would cost time. And time, as everyone in the room knew, was just another way to spell money. Declan stood and left the room before anyone could pretend to respond. He didn't need permission to follow a corpse's shadow. He just needed good boots and something sharp in his head. Fortunately, he had both. Outside, the compound hummed like a beehive run by accountants. Drones flew overhead, carrying samples to the analysis bay. Mining units chewed into the rock like metal termites. The sky, or what passed for it, was a soupy filter of electromagnetic haze. It didn't matter. You didn't come to Baran 7 for the view. You came to dig. Declan walked past the tent where Kyler had died. It had been cleaned, of course. Sanitized. The AI had run disinfectant cycles so intense they probably erased the memory of death itself. But the floor still held traces if you knew how to look. A scuff in the dust, too deliberate. A faint imprint from a human boot. Not Kyler's. Zoke didn't wear boots. He followed the prints. Not for long. About 40 meters from the tent, the trail ended. Not because the person vanished, but because someone had manually swept the surface clean. With care. With precision. As if they knew how to hide. As if they had done this before. Declan crouched and brushed the ground with his gloved fingers. He didn't find anything new. But it wasn't nothing either. A knife. Not a plasma cutter. Not a sonic drill. A knife. Real steel or titanium. Something intimate. Something that required proximity. And pressure. And intent. It wasn't just a murder. It was a message. The question was, who was sending it? Later that evening, Declan sat in his tiny quarters, staring at an old handheld scanner. It wasn't connected to the main grid. He had kept it offline for years. It ran on stripped-down code, no network hooks, no analytics suite. Just sensors, data, and his interpretation. He ran the scan from the tent through it again. No anomalies, no obvious bio residue, no fingerprints the AI hadn't already missed. But the wound geometry still burned in his mind. He had seen a kill like that before. Back on Earth. Decades ago. It had been a small town outside of the Eastern Resource Zone. The killer had used a homemade blade, ground down from an industrial cutting tool. The victim was stabbed once. Clean through. No hesitation. No frenzy. It had taken Declan 3 weeks to track down the suspect. A retired engineer with schizophrenia, off his meds, but disturbingly lucid about his choice of execution. He had said, "I didn't want it to be messy. I just wanted it to be final." Declan still remembered that. And now, on a world with no life, someone had done the same thing. Which either meant the killer was human. Or something very close. He heard a knock at the door. Not a polite digital ping. A physical knock. 3 raps, evenly spaced. He opened the door. Sarlin stood there, looking more translucent than usual. Viherty didn't sweat, but she looked like she wanted to. Her violet eyes flickered faintly. "I need to talk," she said. Declan gestured her in. She stepped inside, clutching a tablet to her chest like a guilty secret. "I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know the council doesn't want interference. But I saw something. Good. Talk fast." She handed him the tablet. He glanced through the data. "Communications logs. Filtered traffic," she said. "Routine transmission pings and telemetry pulses. But look at this." She pointed to a timestamp. Exactly 2:17. 4 minutes before the incident. "There's a spike." "I see it," Declan said. "System flagged it as a low priority echo and filtered it out." But the waveform is off. Intermittent static bursts, inconsistent amplitude. It's not natural noise. Declan nodded slowly. Spoofed signal. Possibly. Or cloak transmission. Could be someone masking movement. Or initiating a hard shutdown of internal sensors. Let me guess. Nobody else thought this was important. Sarlin looked down. I logged it. The AI dismissed it as beneath criticality threshold. So did the review node. Of course it did, Declan muttered. Because nothing matters on a dead planet. Especially not death. She sat, carefully, on the edge of a metal crate. Do you think it was human? Declan didn't answer right away. He stared at the wall as if something behind it might speak. I think it was something that knows how we used to kill each other, he finally said. Something that understands how to stab a heart. How to disable a security net. How to clean up footprints. And how to vanish in a place with nowhere to go. That's terrifying, she whispered. It's worse than that, Declan said. It's familiar. That night, Declan stood outside the compound, staring out into the barren dark. Barn 7 lay still, as always. A place without storms, without sound, without breath. But something had bled here. Something had killed. He looked up at the sensor tower. It blinked green, status normal. He didn't trust it. And he whispered, more to himself than anyone else, on a planet with no life, who brings murder with them? There was no answer. Which, in Declan's experience, meant there probably was one. He just hadn't heard it yet. Declan Voss had seen a lot of knives in his day, some ceremonial, some functional. Some that were just overcompensating. But the one he was thinking about now had no ornamentation, no sentimental value, and definitely no poetry. It was just a long, ugly piece of alloy steel meant to take samples from mineral veins. And it had gone missing exactly one day before Kyler got a new ventilation hole in his torso. Which made it a very interesting knife. He was back in the equipment locker, standing in front of a shelf labeled Manual Tools, Level 1. It was supposed to hold 2 powered chisels, 1 magnetic bore hammer, a set of rock shear blades, and a long blade mineral probe, otherwise known as the only knife sharp enough to pierce a Zok's central plexus without turning the body into soup. The chisels were there. The bore hammer looked bored. The rock shears gleamed with corporate indifference. The knife was gone. Declan stared at the empty slot and exhaled through his nose. Figures. There were only 10 personnel on the compound who had signed out any manual tools since landing. Most of them were already ruled out based on size, species, or basic anatomy. The only name that stood out was Hezek, a Brocca maintenance tech with 6 arms, claws the size of melon slices, and a personality that hovered somewhere between sulky teenager and sleeping walrus. Declan requested a meeting. Hezek arrived 20 minutes later, filling the doorway of the interrogation tent with his bulk. His 6 limbs shifted in subtle patterns of stress and defensiveness. Brocas didn't sweat. They vibrated. You wanted to see me, Hezek said, voice slow and low. Declan gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Or stand. Or fold yourself however you do. I'm not picky. Hezek sat. It looked more like squatting in several directions at once, but it worked. You checked out the mineral knife 2 days ago, Declan began. Yes. For use in bore shaft 2. Did you return it? I left it at the secondary tool hub near shaft 2. Log the action verbally. I have witnesses. Yeah, I checked. No log. No witnesses. No knife. Hezek's pupils narrowed. I do not like your tone. Declan smiled with exactly 0 warmth. I don't like dead engineers. We all have our burdens. Hezek made a sound that could have been a cough or a minor tectonic event. Are you accusing me of murder? I'm accusing you of being unhelpful. If I thought you killed Kyler, I'd have started this conversation with a stun round to the kneecap equivalent of your species. You would not have succeeded. You'd be surprised. They sat in silence for a beat. Hezek shifted again, less tense this time. I did check it out, he said. But I never used it. Bore shaft 2 didn't need manual extraction. I set the knife on a crate. Someone must have taken it. Declan watched his eyes, his claws, the tiny flexes in his lower joints. Brocaws weren't easy to read, but Declan had interrogated more species than he could pronounce. And this one wasn't lying. Not about the important part. You didn't stab anyone, Declan said. No. But you know who did. Hezek didn't answer. Which was, of course, an answer. Declan didn't push. Not yet. He'd seen what happened when you pushed a 6-limbed bit with armor-plated skin and a bad attitude. It usually ended with dental reconstruction. And Declan liked his teeth. Instead, he stood. If the knife turns up, I expect you to report it. I will. Declan left the tent, his boots crunching faintly on the dry packed soil of Barn 7. Dust swirled around his ankles like lazy ghosts. He wasn't satisfied. But he wasn't surprised either. Everyone here had something to hide. The problem was figuring out who had something sharp to go with it. The next morning, the answer arrived in the form of a wide-eyed Grawl engineer named Mick. Mick had the personality of a nervous toaster and the body of an overinflated tire. He waddled into Declan's office like he was afraid it might explode. "I've found something," he said, holding out a scanner. "Out by the perimeter. Looked metallic. I didn't touch it." "Smart toaster," Declan muttered, grabbing his gear. They made their way to the site. It was about 300 meters from Kyler's tent, near the edge of a dust ridge that sloped into nothing. The kind of place you'd go if you wanted something to be forgotten without being buried. Mick pointed. There. The knife was there. Or rather, the mineral probe. But let's not kid ourselves, it was a knife. It was embedded in the ground, handle sticking out at a perfect vertical angle, blade buried almost to the hilt in compacted soil. It had been cleaned. Not just wiped. Polished. There wasn't a speck of blood on it. The handle gleamed like it had never been touched. Which meant someone had touched it. A lot. Declan crouched, scanned it from a safe distance. No prints. No DNA. Not even oil residue. Too clean, he said. Isn't that good? Mick asked. No. It means someone knew what to remove. He reached into his bag, pulled out a forensic wrap, and sealed the knife without disturbing it. Then he walked around it, noting the scuff marks in the dirt. Not many. But just enough to tell a story. Whoever planted the knife had done it in one motion. From above. Direct force. No fumbling. Did you see anyone near this area in the last 24 hours? Declan asked. Mick shook his bulbous head. No one comes out here unless they have to. There's nothing. Declan stared out at the horizon. He believed Mick. Mostly because Mick was too cowardly to lie well. But also because the placement of the knife wasn't meant to hide it. It was meant to be found. That was what bothered him. If you kill someone and you steal the murder weapon, you don't clean it and plant it like a ceremonial offering unless you want someone to find it. Which meant the killer wasn't just smart. They were playing. That made it worse. Back in his quarters, Declan sat at his desk and reviewed his notes. He had a timeline, a body, and a knife that had gone on a scenic tour before returning with a manicure. He had a Braca who couldn't physically commit the murder but could have helped hide the weapon. He had an AI that was either incompetent or manipulated. And he had a gut feeling that whatever this was, it wasn't about a personal grudge. It was about message delivery. He pulled up the site's personnel list. Humans, 1. Declan Voss. Murderers, possibly 1. Human, or close enough to fake it. Not a lot of suspects, he muttered. Unless... Declan looked again at the scan. The precision. The way the bloodless blade had been returned. The quiet timing of the whole event. This isn't someone hiding, he said aloud. This is someone learning. And maybe, just maybe, getting better. He stood, walked to the small viewport in his cabin. Outside, the artificial lights cast long shadows on the red dust. The mining units beeped softly in the distance. Everything seemed normal. That was the problem. On a dead world, you weren't supposed to need to watch your back. Declan Voss did. Because now, there was only one knife on the planet. And someone had already used it. Barn 7 didn't change at night. It just stopped pretending. During the day, artificial lights from the compound made it look like a place trying very hard to be important. At night, it became what it always was. Dead. Silent. Empty. Declan Voss liked it better that way. He stood alone near the now abandoned tent where Kyler had died. Everyone else had long since moved on, either physically or mentally. The AI had scrubbed the scene clean with clinical enthusiasm, leaving no blood, no evidence, and, according to its logs, no further anomalies. But Declan didn't trust logs. He trusted dirt. He crouched, pulled a small cylindrical tube from his satchel, and clicked it on. The tube cast a faint cone of UV blue light across the dusty floor. Dust wasn't just dust. Not here. Not when you knew how to read it. AI sees everything, Declan muttered to himself. Except what's beneath its feet. The dust on Barn 7 was fine-grained, electrostatic, and annoyingly persistent. But that also made it ideal for recording pressure patterns. And sure enough, within seconds, the UV light revealed faint indentations. Footprints. Human-style boots. Not just one set. Two. Declan narrowed his eyes, adjusting the light to cast sharper shadows. One set of prints approached from the west, leading directly to the tent entrance. Another came from the north, cutting across the slope in a slight diagonal. Only one of those sets turned back. The other stopped. Right at the door. Declan looked up, gaze hardening. Two came in. One left. Which wouldn't be weird, if one of them was Kyler. But Kyler didn't have feet. Zoks slithered. They didn't step. Which meant both sets belonged to humanoid individuals. And one of them had either vanished, or was still here. Declan turned his attention to the northern prints. They were shallower, more narrow, with a slightly tapered heel. He leaned in, inspecting the pattern. It was old school. Tread pattern like the kind issued to planetary security forces back on Earth about 80 years ago. He recognized it immediately. Mostly because he used to wear the same kind. He still had a pair. Back in storage. Retired and dusty. But these weren't his. The size was wrong. A half size smaller. And his boots were accounted for. He blinked, let out a slow breath, then said, either someone's got a retro fashion fetish, or something very strange is going on. He swept his light across the rest of the floor, following the shallow northern trail until it vanished halfway between the tent and the rock ridge. There was no wind here. No animal to disturb the ground. No machines rolled over this area. And yet, the prints stopped. Clean. As if the person had simply ceased to exist mid-step. Declan stood up slowly, brushing dust off his knees. The air around him was still, heavy with silence. His breath fogged briefly against the mask. He didn't like this. Not the mystery. He liked mysteries fine. He just didn't like the shape this one was starting to take. He turned back toward the tent and swept the beam of light under the fold of the outer tarp. There, caught on the edge of a folded seat, was something that should not have been there. A thread. Thin. Frayed. Brown. He plucked it free with tweezers and held it up to the light. It glimmered faintly, the weave familiar. Nylon carbon blend. Early synthetic. Cheap and tough. The kind of fiber used in uniforms before Polyflex replaced everything. Declan knew exactly where it came from. He had worn jackets made of it when he was 23. Specifically, when he was a probationary field officer in the Chicago zone. The year 2157. He hadn't seen that kind of fabric in decades. Great, he said out loud. Now the ghosts are dressing like me? He sealed the fiber in a specimen vial, marked the location, and scanned the immediate area for more. Nothing. Returning to his cabin, Declan powered up his own gear. Not networked, not approved, and definitely not modern. It was a drone. Old and half-dented, a ground hover type originally designed for topographical surveys. He had kept it for its durability and, more importantly, because it had no automatic filters. He ran a batch playback of its last recorded footage near Kyler's tent, toggling through various wavelength views. The standard optical showed nothing. Thermal was inconclusive. But the near-infrared? There. Just 3 seconds of a flicker. A humanoid shape. Standing absolutely still, a few meters from the tent. Declan leaned closer. The figure didn't have enough heat signature to be alive, at least not by standard metrics. But its outline was clear. Broad shoulders. Straight posture. Familiar silhouette. Then it moved. The figure took 2 steps forward. Stopped again. Then faded from view. Declan froze the frame. The body proportions. The stance. The movement. It looked like him. Not metaphorically. Not stylistically. Literally. Same build. Same height. Same gait. Same slight roll on the right leg from an old knee injury. He felt a strange hollowness in his chest. Not fear, not exactly. But something colder. Something unsettled. He rewound, played it again. Same result. Not a glitch. Not a random shadow. The drone had caught a humanoid form matching his own body profile standing outside a murder scene just minutes before the time of death. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Either someone's really good at impersonating me, he said softly. Or I've got a serious sleepwalking problem. Neither option sat well. Because if it was a person trying to look like him, that meant someone had access to data and biometric detail way beyond casual mimicry. And if it was him? That was worse. He opened a private voice log. Entry. Voss. Personal. Day 6. Barn 7, he said. He paused. I found footprints. They are mine. But they are not. There's someone out there who walks like me. Looks like me. And they were at the scene before the body dropped. No idea how they vanished. No explanation from AI. No readings. No trace. He leaned forward again, replaying the flickering shadow of the figure on his monitor. I've spent a lifetime solving other people's crimes, he added. Feels like I might be walking into one of my own. He clicked off the log. Outside, the red dust shifted faintly under the artificial lights. Not a breeze. Just the memory of one. Declan stared through the window. If you're me, he whispered, what the hell am I? There was no answer. But somewhere out there, in the silence of Barn 7, the footprints were still there. Waiting. The interstellar patrol ship ISV Chamberlain arrived 6 days late and 20 IQ points short. Declan watched from the command center window as it descended with theatrical precision, casting a clean circle of light across the compound's gravel-red perimeter. A boarding ramp extended. 4 uniformed officers stepped out in perfect synchronicity, followed by 2 black-suited figures carrying briefcases that probably cost more than this entire outpost's annual maintenance. He sipped what passed for coffee and muttered, "Here come the cavalry." With clipboards. When the doors of the command dome opened, the team filed in like a legal advertisement brought to life. The lead officer, Lieutenant Enver Klein, had the expression of someone who could read your criminal record and your blood pressure at the same time. She gave the room a once-over, then locked eyes with Declan. "You reported an incident," she said. "No," Declan replied. "I reported a murder." Klein looked down at her notepad. "Right. One deceased Zoke engineer. Cause of death, undetermined. No active energy discharge. No radiation trace. No biometric anomalies. No surveillance footage. No AI alert." "Correct," Declan said. She tilted her head. "Then what do you expect us to investigate?" He took another sip of his coffee. "The part where someone stuck a goddamn knife in his chest." One of the black-suited legal reps cleared her throat. She was short, angular, and looked like she hadn't blinked since orbit. "Mr. Voss," she said, "our preliminary review of the incident suggests that while the deceased did suffer bodily trauma, the lack of corresponding high-energy metrics precludes classification under Interstellar Code 442. Which means no murder. Insufficient indicators. You're saying someone's only officially murdered if they die with Wi-Fi?" She blinked. "Once. We require 4 criteria to confirm an interplanetary homicide. Biological impact. Energy disturbance. Recorded intention. And network verifiable activity. This case fulfills only one." Declan set his mug down, slowly. "You left out the part where there's a knife in his goddamn chest. It has not been verified as a murder weapon. It was not found at the scene." "No," he said, "it was found 300 meters away, clean, spotless, embedded in dirt like a goddamn exclamation point." Lieutenant Klein stepped forward. "Let's do this formally. We're convening a technical review. You'll present your data. We'll compare it against network standards. AI will moderate. Standard protocol." Declan crossed his arms. "Let's." The review took place in a central conference unit, a sterile dome with a ring of chairs and a pulsing AI interface hovering in the middle. Participants sat in a semicircle. Declan stood alone in front, arms behind his back like he was back in the academy and already regretting it. "Begin," the AI said. Declan tapped his pad. Holograms shimmered to life, a photo of the body, the drone footage, infrared stills, the knife scan, and a detailed map of the footprints. "I'll make this fast." The victim died from a direct stabbing wound to the central organ cluster. The angle and depth suggest manual force with a sharpened steel object. No energy burns, no plasma trace. Classic physical trauma. He flipped to the next image. This is the murder weapon. Mining knife. Last seen in inventory 2 days before the incident. Found later, cleaned, planted in the ground. No prints, no bioresidue. Purposefully sanitized. Another flip. Drone infrared caught this. A humanoid figure matching my own silhouette, approaching the 10 minutes before the estimated time of death. Klein frowned. "Matching your silhouette?" "Yes," Declan said flatly. "But not me. I was in my quarters. AI logs confirm it." The AI blinked. "Confirmed. Voss's presence during incident, 312 meters from event locus. Heart rate consistent with sleep phase." Declan nodded. "See? I sleep like a baby. One who's also being framed for murder." The legal rep raised a hand. "You are not being accused. We are merely verifying whether this qualifies as a prosecutable case." Declan leaned forward. "Azoke is dead. A knife is missing, then found. A ghost wearing my shape walks into a tent. And your conclusion is?" Klein glanced at the AI, who responded in a cool monotone. "Insufficient markers for formal homicide classification. Lack of energy trace or confirmed sentient intent." Declan stepped back, stared at them all, and laughed once. Dry. Short. Bitter. This is galactic-grade bullshit stacked on bureaucratic horseshit, with a side of tech snob crap. "Mr. Voss," said the lawyer. He ignored her. "You want data?" You've got more than enough. You just don't know how to look at it unless it's got a quantum signature attached to it and a metadata timestamp. But people still kill the old way. Stabbing, cutting, choking. You just forgot how to see it. You have not proven intent, said the AI. You have not proven a brain, said Declan. There was silence. Then Klein stood. Our review is concluded. We are transferring jurisdiction of the event to the compound's automated systems. If further anomalies occur, we will re-engage. They filed out like a closing ceremony. Declan watched them go. Back in his cabin, he sat at his desk, hands steepled, mind humming. They'd locked his admin access. Cited procedural compliance. He couldn't even download new logs now. The whole site was back under full AI oversight. Which meant he had a day. Maybe two. Before even his presence here would be flagged as disruptive. He wasn't going to wait. He pulled a small chip from under the desk panel, inserted it into his private system. It was a dead circuit, an old-school relay storage with no outbound protocol. It had everything he needed. The drone footage, the footprint scans, the raw thermal data. He had copied it just before the shutdown. And they hadn't noticed. He leaned back and said aloud, "Fine. Let the suits chase data that doesn't exist. I'll keep looking for the killer who does." The lights in his cabin flickered once. Nothing major. Just a pulse. He frowned. The power here was usually stable. Then he heard it. A faint static hum. Like feedback from an old comms rig. He stood, slowly. Outside the viewport, the red dust still shimmered under artificial light. Nothing moved. But something had. He could feel it. The mine didn't breathe. Declan Voss had walked through more underground tunnels than most people had eaten hot meals, and this one felt wrong in ways he couldn't quite define. It wasn't just the silence. It was the expectation that something should be making noise but wasn't. Tarn had vanished 12 hours earlier. Big growl guy. Worked slow, worked clean, never missed a check-in. The AI chalked it up to a delayed report, a possible tracking fault, then a low-priority disappearance. 2 hours later, still nothing. Then it pinged Declan, as if to say, "Maybe you were right. Please don't rub it in." He didn't. He grabbed a hand scanner, his old non-network thermal sensor, and headed straight for the mine. No one offered to go with him. No one even looked at him when he left. The shaft was cut wide enough for transport drones and dumb enough to echo every footstep 3 times. Declan's boots crunched softly in the dust as he descended past levels 1 and 2, finally reaching the 3rd dig zone. No ambient lights down here. Just his shoulder lamp, flickering on impact as if the air disapproved of illumination. He walked slowly, sweeping the scanner in long, practiced arcs. Ambient temperature, 2 degrees below baseline. Static noise in the M-band. Trace mineral interference. Normal for Baran 7. Until it wasn't. The scanner pinged once, then died. Just a blink of interference and a failed reboot. He slapped the side of it. "Don't do this to me now," he muttered. Nothing. So he pulled out the old one. His thermal handheld. Something built before AI overlays and quantum recalibration. Something that worked because it wasn't smart enough to lie. He flicked it on. The display pulsed once, then resolved. A humanoid shape. Standing. Completely still. Roughly 15 meters away, down the tunnel to the left. Just outside his field of vision. Declan froze. The figure didn't move. No heat signature. No registered heartbeat. No motion trail. Just a human-shaped ghost etched in low-band infrared. He took a breath. Then stepped forward. 5 steps. 7. 10. The corridor bent. He turned the corner, flashlight up. Empty. The tunnel was empty. No dust disturbance. No footprints. No residual heat. He held up the thermal again. The shape was gone. Declan didn't panic. Panic was for people who still thought things were supposed to make sense. He turned slowly, retraced his steps, and stopped. The shape was back. Behind him now. Near the entrance to the shaft. He didn't move. The figure didn't move. They stared at each other through the filter of thermal wavelengths. Silent. Breathless. He whispered, "If you're trying to screw with me, it's working." Then he blinked. And it was gone. Back at the main junction, Declan leaned against the wall and scanned again. Nothing. The tunnel was dead. But his locator pinged. A soft chirp from his non-network tracker. A faint signal. He accessed the raw data stream. Not the overlay. Not the AI-interpreted version. Just the bare code. It read: SCP-07X//human clone, failed / access denied. Then the device shut off. Not glitched. Not jammed. Shut down. Declan stared at it. He tapped it twice. Tried to restart. Nothing. Well, he said, that's subtle. He sat on a crate of unused mining cores and pulled up his voice recorder. He needed to get it down before his memory folded it into something manageable. Log entry. Declan Voss. Barn 7. Day 8. He paused. The words didn't come easy. Not because he was confused, but because part of him really didn't want to commit them to record. Tarn is gone. The mine's quiet. Too quiet. And now something's down there. Something shaped like a man, but not registering like one. He glanced at the tracker again. Got a signal. SCP-07X. Human clone, failed. That's not just a code. That's a file name. One I've heard before. He stood up, stretched the stiffness out of his legs, and started walking back toward the exit. The Reflect Project. Experimental human clones, built from security personnel templates. Field deployment units for hostile planets. All terminated 20 years ago after psychological instability. He reached the surface. Unless one wasn't. Back in his cabin, Declan dug through a hidden storage bin under the floor. Inside were a few old drives from his police days. Not connected to any network. Just raw data cubes. He powered up the oldest one. There it was. SCP-07X, Reflect Series File. Declan Voss. Security Officer. DNA profile attached. Field use rejected. Personality drift exceeded acceptable threshold. Prototype discontinued. Except maybe it wasn't. He sat back. If one of the old prototypes had survived. If it had somehow been reactivated, or worse, never shut down. If it had been dropped here as part of some long-forgotten test and left behind. And if that clone still thought it was him. Then it would walk like me, he said aloud. Think like me. Maybe even kill like me. His computer chimed. New surveillance footage. He frowned. He hadn't authorized anything. The file loaded. External corridor camera. 5 minutes ago. It showed a figure walking past his cabin. A man. Same build. Same jacket. Same limp. Declan paused the video. Zoomed in. It was him. Or someone who looked exactly like him. 5 minutes ago. While he had been in the mine. He checked the timestamp. Correct. Unaltered. He hadn't been there. But someone had. He leaned forward, whispering into the silence. You're not a ghost. Then more quietly. You're me. He played the footage again. Watched the clone pause. Turn. Look straight into the camera. Then vanish. Not run. Not duck. Just blinked out. Declan stared at the frozen frame for a long moment. Then opened his log recorder one more time. Something down here thinks it's me. Walks like me. Moves like me. But it doesn't breathe. It doesn't leave a trace. And it doesn't belong. This isn't just a murder case anymore. It's a message. And I think I was the one who wrote it. Outside his cabin, the dust moved again. This time, he didn't check. He just locked the door. Declan Voss had seen some weird classified crap in his years as a cop, but nothing quite prepared him for the sinking feeling of reading about a dead black site project that somehow lined up with the present state of his life. He was sitting cross-legged on the cabin floor, surrounded by data cubes, an ancient external reader humming beside him like an old dog with emphysema. The name on the decrypted file wasn't subtle: SCP-07X, reflect site records, do not restore. Which of course meant someone, somewhere, had tried to bury it deep enough that only fools or ex-cops with trust issues would dig it up. Enter Declan. The document was blunt in that delightful military way. Barn 7, years ago, had been a Category Grey field experiment zone under Project Reflect. The mission was bold, unethical, and completely off the books. Take the DNA of retired or deceased security personnel with strong site profiles and reconstitute them into artificial field units, human clones. Not just meat puppets, either. These were designed to think, feel, remember. A shortcut to a ready-made soldier with no pesky individuality, just enough memory to be efficient, just enough loyalty to follow orders. Declan didn't know whether to laugh or throw up. It got worse. The project failed, obviously. Most of the clones developed identity instability, a fancy term for started thinking they were real people with real lives. Some even tried to return to Earth, claiming service pensions and contacting families they technically never had. A few were decommissioned. Most were destroyed during shutdown. But 5 units, SCP-07X through SCP-11Z, went missing during evacuation. Lost in red zone collapse. Declared non-retrievable. Meaning, they gave up looking and hoped nobody would ever notice. Guess what? Declan thought. Someone noticed. He copied the files as fast as the archaic interface allowed, which wasn't very. He was almost done when a flicker of red appeared on the corner of the screen. Not an error. A command override. The system asked for an uplink it shouldn't even know existed. Then a voice, not a real one, more like the suggestion of authority, spoke inside the cabin's COMM grid. Unauthorized archival recall detected. Incident flagged. Memory integrity compromised. Then the files began vanishing. Not deleted. Erased, as if someone were actively reaching through time and scrubbing his access. He yanked the drive out and cursed. A third of the files were intact. The rest? Toast. But one last fragment had survived. A sequence string. A DNA map. And it matched exactly with his own. Declan sat very, very still. His coffee had gone cold. His hands had gone colder. There are moments when a person confronts the awful possibility that their entire existence may be a bureaucratic accident. This was one of those moments. He checked his ID records. His birth certificate. The stuff people never question. All legit. But now? It all felt like formatting on a screen. Easily faked, perfectly convincing, but still, digital. Manufactured. What if I'm not the original? He thought. What if I'm just one of the missing clones they lost? The only one stable enough to pass as human? He stared into the cabin's reflective window, watching his face shift in the faint light. Same beard. Same scar. Same crow's feet around the eyes from too many years of being disappointed by humanity. Or maybe that was just part of the template. A pre-installed emotional history. He opened a new log. Declan Voss. Barn 7. Day 9. Project Reflect was real. Barn was one of the test sites. Clones based on real people. Psychological failure. Project shutdown. 5 units lost. My DNA matches one of the missing tags. SCP-07X. I may be the last one. He closed the recorder. There was a knock on the cabin door. A real one. He stood quietly, hand to sidearm, not because he expected violence, but because at this point, he wasn't ruling out anything. He opened the door. Nothing. Just dust and the dry hum of a dead world. But something had changed. The perimeter sensors, ones he had installed manually, not the base AI, were blinking amber. That meant movement. Close movement. A few minutes ago. He walked outside, slowly, scanning the ground. There were tracks fresh. Boot prints identical to his own, down to the exact curve of the heel. They led nowhere. Declan followed anyway. He reached the western ridge line. That's when he saw it. A figure, distant, standing still. Same height. Same build. Same jacket. Declan raised a hand. The figure didn't respond. He reached for his binoculars. Adjusted the focus. The figure turned. It was his face. Then it was gone. No sound. No shimmer. Just absence. Declan's hands trembled. He wasn't a believer in ghosts, never had been. He believed in mistakes. In classified programs. In dumb decisions by smarter people. And this was all of it. Back inside the cabin, his console blinked. An inbound file. No sender. Just an audio clip labeled playback, recall_01. He tapped it. His own voice, distorted but clear, played through the speakers. I remember the fire. I remember the kill order. I remember being left behind. Then silence. Not white noise. Just absence. Declan stood there for a long time, the echo of his own voice clawing inside his skull. If that was a clone, or if he was, then who gave the kill order? Who decided which copies lived or died? And more importantly, why was someone keeping it alive? He sat down, stared at the file again. The voice had sounded older. Maybe angrier. Maybe even closer to the edge. What if he wasn't the only one still alive? What if this wasn't the first time the copy had killed? Clone. Kill. Repeat. Maybe it was the only thing it remembered how to do. Maybe now it was just waiting for the original. Or the other way around. He looked at his hand. Flexed his fingers. Thought about every decision he had made in the past week. What part of those were truly his? Outside, the dust settled briefly. Then footprints appeared where there had been none. Heading toward his cabin. He reached for his gun. This time, he meant it. The bias signal came in at 0437, it was weak, uneven, and absolutely impossible. According to every map and manifest, no one was supposed to be in Sector D13. Declan Voss stared at the reading with a frown that had become a permanent fixture on his face since this whole mess started. Ghost signal, the AI offered unhelpfully. Seismic interference from collapsed Tunnel 4. Declan didn't believe in ghosts, and he didn't believe in convenient explanations anymore. Alia Kren was already gearing up before he asked. She was practical like that. Tall, wiry, smart enough to make a xenobiologist cry, and one of the few people on Barn 7 who hadn't tried to shoot him, sue him, or dismiss him with a polite shrug. If you're going after a signal this weird, I'm not letting you go alone, she said. Also, I want to see it for myself. The signal led them to a sealed storage depot, one of the older prefab units left over from the early survey missions. It hadn't been accessed in weeks, maybe longer. Dust blanketed the outer access panel. Declan keyed in the override manually. No hiss of power. Just a metal groan like the planet itself was reluctantly remembering the concept of hinges. Inside, huddled in the corner like someone had poured a man into the shape of panic and pressed pause, was a human being. Or something like one. He looked up when they stepped in, eyes wide and bloodshot, wearing his standard tech suit with his OK Engineering crest on his shoulder. His lips trembled. "Alia," he said. "Oh, thank God, I thought I was going insane. They tried to kill me. I don't remember how I got here. I just woke up." Alia froze. Declan didn't. He raised his sidearm and stepped between them. "Who are you?" The man blinked, confused. "It's me. Larrick. Don't you recognize me?" Declan's voice was stone. "You died. We found your body with a knife through the heart. You've been in cryo for 9 days." The man flinched like he'd been slapped. "That's a mistake. I'm not dead. I'm right here. Ask Alia. She knows. She was with me when the oxygen filters blew in Shaft 9. She kissed me afterward." Alia's mouth tightened. "How do you know that?" "Because it happened," the man said. "Because I remember." Declan circled slowly, keeping his weapon trained but not firing. "Not yet. What's the last thing you remember before waking up here?" "I was in my bunk. I had a headache. Everything went black. Then I was here." His breathing grew fast, panicked. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Alia said nothing. Declan, however, had seen this dance before. He'd interrogated enough suspects who believed their own lies, and enough broken systems that built their own realities. He spoke calmly. "You said Alia kissed you. What happened just before that?" "The shaft collapse. I stayed behind to stabilize the pressure seals. We lost 2 drones." Declan shook his head. "I wasn't there for that." "You were," the man insisted. "You yelled at me for risking the backup grid. I wasn't even assigned to your shift that week." The man blinked rapidly. His face twitched, uncertain. I don't understand." "You're remembering someone else's life," Declan said. "Or something implanted to make you think it's yours." "No," the man said firmly. "I'm Larrick. I remember growing up in the Zoke crash. I remember my sister, the fire at the Helix plant, the way my father made me memorize repair manuals before he'd let me sleep. I remember every moment with Alia. I remember." He stopped. His gaze darkened. "You're trying to take that away." "No," Alia whispered. "We're trying to understand." "You're lying. You're not her. You're part of the system. You're testing me. Just like before." Declan caught the shift. The eyes had changed. Recognition had turned to suspicion. Then to something worse. "You're not real," the man said. "This isn't real. They did this before. They changed the lights, the faces. They said I was broken." "What's your name?" Declan asked carefully. "I told you. Larrick's okay." "No. That's not your name. That's the name of a man who's dead." The figure stood. Not fast, not threatening. Just, decided. "Then maybe you're the one who's broken." And with that, he lunged at Alia. Declan moved without thinking. He caught the clone mid-sprint and slammed him against the wall. The man struggled, strong, but not coordinated. It wasn't a fighter's body. It was an engineer's memory wrapped around unstable muscles. Declan didn't shoot. He just pressed the barrel to the man's forehead. "If you remember so much," he said coldly, "who was the first person you killed?" The clone stopped moving. "Because someone died," Declan said. "Not an accident. You stabbed a man. Clean. Center mass. You did that." "No," the clone said. "I didn't. I wouldn't. You don't get to decide that. Your code does." "I am not code," the man screamed. "I am not code. I am not code. I am not code. He collapsed. Not unconscious. Just still. As if his processor had overheated. Alia dropped to her knees beside him. He's breathing. Pulse is unstable, but present. Declan holstered his weapon. We'll restrain him. Run a full neuroscan. She looked up. Her eyes were glossy. What if he's not lying? What if he is Lyric? Then someone brought a dead man back to life with half a soul and a full set of memories, Declan said. And forgot to tell him he's not allowed to be human. They carried the clone back to the lab in silence. No drones. No AI. Just two people, one broken body, and a whole lot of ethical rot. As Declan secured the door, Alia asked softly, how many of them do you think are still out there? Declan didn't answer. He was staring at the clone's face. It looked peaceful now. Almost grateful. And deep down, somewhere he refused to examine, Declan wondered what his own face would look like if someone told him tomorrow that he wasn't real either. He didn't want to find out. Outside the station, the wind howled. And two more bias signals flickered on the outer edge of the grid. Human. Or close enough to try. Declan Voss had done a lot of reckless things in his life, faking a heat signature to ambush a smuggler ship. Riding a prototype grav sled over a molten ridge because the AI said it was probably survivable. Accepting a posting on Baran 7. But locking down an entire planet? That was new, even for him. He slammed the emergency override into the system panel and watched the lights turn red across the map. Section by section, Baran 7 shut its mouth. The uplink towers went silent. The orbital relay blinked once and vanished from connection. The AI core entered cold standby. No messages in. No data out. Just Declan, 36 terrified crew members, and a creature that may or may not think it's human. Alia spun toward him as the sirens started. You just isolated us from the entire sector. Do you have any idea what kind of breach this is? Declan didn't flinch. Yes. The kind that gets people court-martialed. And also the kind that saves lives. She paced, fists tight at her sides. They are going to send enforcement ships. Good, Declan said. Maybe then someone will listen. Declan, the clone might be unstable, but this... It's not just unstable, he cut her off. It's adaptive. The first one broke. The second one hid. This one thinks. He pulled up the latest internal motion report. Something had triggered a proximity alert in the command module. No forced entry. No broken seal. Just presence. Movement. And then silence. Declan grabbed his weapon. By the time they reached the command center, the main door was locked from inside. No one answered the comms. Alia patched into the backup visual feed. A single technician, Jamid Hallier, sat slumped in a chair. Across from him stood a man. Broad-shouldered. Calm posture. Wearing a uniform with no insignia. His face looked like it had been copied from a recruitment pamphlet, average, likable, forgettable. The clone. Except it wasn't attacking. It wasn't screaming. It was talking. Declan turned up the audio feed. What's my name? The clone asked. Hallier stammered. I don't know. You're not in the crew registry. The clone leaned forward slightly. But I know yours. Jamid. Level 2 Tech Ops. You came here because your wife thought it would pay off the mortgage. You miss her, but you never call. Jamid went pale. I remember something, the clone said. I remember being 6. A cold room. Wires in my arms. Men in masks. They said I was special. One of many. But I wasn't ready. They said I couldn't go yet. And then, nothing. Until now. Declan whispered, it's not interrogating. It's recounting. Alia nodded slowly. It doesn't want information. It wants to make sense of its own. Then why lock itself in? Because it doesn't trust what's outside. The clone turned toward the camera, slowly. His gaze landed on the lens like he could see them through it. If I was made, then someone must have wanted me. Designed me. Fed me lies and called them memories. But they didn't finish. They left holes. He picked up a data pad from the table. This says I'm not real. That there's no record of me. But I feel pain. I feel doubt. I feel betrayal. He looked back at Jamet. Do you know what that's like? To remember holding your sister's hand, only to be told she never existed. Jamet didn't speak. He was shaking now. Declan finally acted. Override manual seal. Let me in. Are you sure? Alia asked. No. The door hissed open. Declan stepped inside, weapon lowered but ready. The clone didn't move. Just stared. You're him, it said. No, Declan replied. You're you. I'm me. You've been following me? I've been cleaning up after you. You killed someone. The clone blinked. I don't remember. But it happened. Then maybe I didn't do it. Declan raised an eyebrow. The knife had your fingerprints. The DNA matched. The clone pointed at his head. But in here? It's clean. Declan stepped closer. Maybe that's what makes it worse. The clone let out a breath. Then tell me. If I'm not human, what am I allowed to feel? Declan didn't answer. Instead, he lowered the weapon fully. You broke into this room, Declan said. You could have killed Jamet. You didn't. That says more than any scan. Alia entered behind him. You're changing. That's not what these clones were designed to do. I wasn't designed. I woke up. She frowned. You were part of Project SCP-07X. I don't know what that means. It means you're a fallback. A ghost in a body that was never meant to last this long. The clone sat down. Then why am I still here? No one answered. Then a soft chime pinged from Declan's wrist. Alia checked hers. Multiple signals. Approaching. Human biosigns. Unregistered. Declan looked up. More of you. The clone shook his head. No. They are not like me. What are they? They didn't wake up asking questions. Declan's jaw tightened. Then we're not done. Outside, the wind howled like it remembered its purpose. The lockdown protocol continued. But the planet had stopped listening. And something else had started to move. They took the clone in chains, not because he resisted, not because he posed a threat in that moment, but because that's what the protocols dictated. He didn't even flinch when the molecular binds locked around his wrists, glowing faintly with blue restraint light. His eyes, Declan's eyes, just watched the floor like it had betrayed him personally. Declan Voss stood outside the launch bay as the clone was loaded into a black armor transport. No one looked at him. Not the guards, not the scientists, not even Alia. Orders were orders, and the clone was classified as a Category Delta unregistered bioconstruct. That was code for, throw it in a box and don't ask questions. It took Declan 3 days and every remaining favor he could call in to secure a visitor clearance to Virelis Holding Station. Technically it wasn't a prison. It was a containment facility for extralegal biologicals. But if it walked like a prison and reeked of antiseptic and regret like a prison, Declan called it what it was. He stepped into the visitation module alone. The guard gestured him forward with a practiced indifference. 5 minutes. No physical contact. No recordings. The cell was all glass and silence. And inside sat the clone, upright, composed, waiting. You didn't bring a gun this time, the clone said. I brought something heavier, Declan replied, placing a small satchel on the floor between them. A clear panel separated them, but the gesture held weight. The clone tilted his head. A bomb. A journal. That earned a raised eyebrow. Seriously? Declan stepped closer, his voice low. Do you know why they picked me as a neural base for the original program? Durability. Trauma retention. Stable moral framework. I read the files, the clone said flatly. That's what the numbers said. But they missed something. I wasn't stable. I was recovering. Still am. He looked the clone in the eyes. That makes us both unfinished. The clone leaned back against the wall. So what's the point of this? Closure? No. Continuity. A chime sounded. 2 minutes remaining. Declan opened the satchel. Inside was a worn, leather-bound journal. The corners were frayed, the spine patched with adhesive tape. It had survived 20 years, 3 planetary relocations, 1 divorce, and a lightning strike to his apartment's roof. He slid it through the bio-seal drop tray. The clone hesitated. Then reached. The journal felt heavy. Not from weight, but from expectation. What is this? He asked. My life, Declan said. The parts you weren't given. The moments after the batch. The memories that didn't make the neural imprint. It's not an apology. It's a map. The clone flipped open the first page. A line read, Day 1, left the precinct. Took the long way home. Thought I'd feel free. Just felt hollow. You were melodramatic, he said with a smirk. I was trying to stay human. Another chime. Time's up. Declan stood, slowly. They'll keep you here. Maybe forever. But you'll have something no one can delete. The clone didn't look up. He was already turning the page. As Declan left the cell, the guard didn't say a word. Outside, the artificial lights of Aurelius hummed against the vacuum-proof glass, reflecting endless versions of himself in every direction. Back on Baran 7, the dust hadn't moved. The planet didn't care who won, who was right, or which version of Declan stayed behind. But he cared. He filed one last report into the planetary log system. The entity designated SCP-07X has shown capacity for memory, reflection, and ethical cognition. It is not a weapon. It is a mirror. And perhaps, one day, a person. I recommend continued observation, not containment. He signed it, set his transmitter to silent, and walked out into the dry wind. There was no one left on Baran 7. And that was exactly why he stayed. Somewhere in a containment cell orbiting a nameless star, a man who was never born reads a journal he never wrote, and somehow remembers every word. His name isn't Declan Voss. But his memories are. And as the pages turn, so does something deeper. Not programming. Not mission directives. But choice. He was built to obey. Built to fight. Built to die if necessary. Instead, he's reading. Learning. Becoming. And far away, on the silent world of Baran 7, the original man, the one with the scars and the silence and the weary sense of what justice used to mean, waits. Not for rescue. Not for redemption. Just to make sure the one thing that should never have existed, gets the chance to exist anyway. Because sometimes, the most human thing you can do isn't to survive. It's to let someone else start over with your name, your pain, and a better ending. This was never just a murder mystery. It was the story of a copy, and a man who chose to see him as more than that.